The first time my cousin crossed the line, I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. The second time, I blamed timing. By the third, I started questioning my own judgment. And by the time I turned 32, I understood the truth: it was never an accident. My name is Elena, and for most of my adult life, every man I loved eventually ended up in my cousin's orbit. Not because she loved them, but because she needed to prove she could take them. I grew up in Lakewood, Ohio, in a family where closeness was enforced rather than earned. Everyone lived within a 30-minute drive, and skipping a gathering was treated like a personal insult. Holidays weren't optional. They were obligations wrapped in casseroles and passive-aggressive smiles. At the center of everything was my grandmother, Marjorie, who believed family unity mattered more than truth. If something went wrong, you didn't confront it, you smiled and pretended it never happened. My cousin Renee was my aunt's youngest daughter and the undeniable favorite. From the time she was a child, adults bent toward her without realizing it. Renee had a presence that demanded attention. Long dark hair, sharp features, a confidence that made people feel chosen when she focused on them. I was the opposite, quieter, observant. I learned early that blending into the background was safer. The first time Renee took someone from me, I was 23. I had just started dating Caleb, a freelance web designer with soft eyes and a nervous laugh. He was thoughtful in a way I wasn't used to, remembered small details, checked in without being asked. After 3 months together, he met my family at a Thanksgiving dinner hosted at my aunt's house. I warned him ahead of time. I told him my family was loud, intrusive, and prone to overstepping. He squeezed my hand and said he wanted to know where I came from. Renee arrived late, as usual, wearing a form-fitting emerald dress that looked more appropriate for a cocktail bar than a family meal. No one commented. They never did. During dinner, she positioned herself across from Caleb and laughed a little too hard at his jokes. I noticed, but I told myself I was being paranoid. After dessert, we moved to the living room. Caleb and I sat together on the couch, until Renee slid in between us, pressing her thigh against his. She touched his arm when she spoke, leaned close when she laughed, asked questions that felt intimate rather than polite. I sat there, invisible, as if I hadn't brought him. Later, when I went to refill my drink, I found them alone in the kitchen. Renee's hand rested flat against his chest as she spoke. When she saw me, she smiled sweetly and said she was just telling him how lucky he was to have me. I laughed it off. I didn't want to seem insecure. 3 weeks later, Caleb ended things. He said he wasn't ready for something serious. 2 months after that, I saw photos of him and Renee together online. I cried, then convinced myself it was coincidence. It wasn't. The same pattern repeated itself with Andrew, a middle school teacher who loved hiking. Renee bonded with him over volunteer work. They exchanged numbers for organizing events. A month later, he accused me of being controlling when I asked about it. Then there was Marcus, an accountant. Renee asked him to help her move apartments. I wasn't invited. When I brought it up, he said I was overreacting. Every time, my family minimized it. My mother said Renee didn't mean harm. My aunt said men made their own choices. My grandmother told me I should learn to be more confident if I wanted to keep a partner. Eventually, I stopped bringing anyone home. I told people I was focused on my career. The truth was simpler. I was tired of watching history repeat itself. Then I met Daniel. Daniel was steady, thoughtful, a medical resident who listened more than he spoke. We dated for 8 months before the holidays came around again. This time, I told him everything. I explained Renee. I explained my fear. He kissed my forehead and promised me I had nothing to worry about. At Christmas, Renee tried again. She hovered, she flirted, she spilled wine on purpose and asked Daniel for help cleaning it up. For just a moment, I saw hesitation in his eyes before he followed her into the kitchen. Nothing happened, he said later. But I recognized the shift. 2 months after that, he ended things. He said he felt confused. That was when something inside me broke. I stopped dating. I stopped attending family events. I stopped trying to compete with someone who always won. Instead, I volunteered at a literacy program in Cuyahoga County, helping adults improve their reading and writing skills. That's where I began exchanging letters with Jonah, an inmate preparing for release. Jonah was blunt, honest, and surprisingly gentle. He never flirted. He never pushed. He listened. We wrote for nearly a year. When he was released, we met for coffee in downtown Cleveland. He wasn't polished. He wasn't impressive on paper. But he was real. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Thanksgiving came faster than I expected. When Jonah suggested coming with me, my first instinct was to say no. Not because I didn't want him there, but because I was terrified of watching the same story play out again. I warned him about Renee. I didn't soften it. I told him exactly what she had done, how my family reacted, and how every time I thought things would be different, they weren't. Jonah listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once and said, "If she crosses a line, I'll handle it." "You won't have to." I wanted to believe him. Dinner was at my aunt's house again, the same place where so many of my relationships had quietly died. Walking in felt like stepping onto a stage where I already knew the ending. Renee was there before us, dressed impeccably, greeting everyone like she owned the room. The moment she saw Jonah, her attention locked onto him. She smiled, slowly, deliberately. She introduced herself with an exaggerated warmth, touched his arm while laughing, asked questions that went beyond polite curiosity. I felt my chest tighten, that familiar dread crawling up my spine. But Jonah didn't respond the way the others had. He stepped back when she leaned in. He answered politely but briefly. And every time she tried to pull him into a separate conversation, he found his way back to me. At one point, she spilled a drink near him, clearly intentional, and asked for help cleaning it up in the kitchen. Jonah looked at me first. "Do you want me to?" he asked. I shook my head. "I'll grab paper towels," he said calmly, then returned and cleaned it up right there in front of everyone. Renee's smile faltered. Later, Jonah told me she cornered him anyway. She told him I was insecure, that I had issues with jealousy, that men always left me for a reason. She said he could do better. He told her he wasn't interested and suggested she stop interfering in other people's relationships. She didn't speak to him again that night. For the first time in my life, Renee failed. The aftermath was worse than I expected. Renee didn't confront me directly. Instead, she went to my family. She hinted that Jonah was dangerous, that his past made him untrustworthy, that I was putting myself at risk. My aunt pulled me aside and asked if I was thinking clearly. My mother warned me not to get hurt. My grandmother said nothing, but her silence was louder than words. Jonah heard about all of it and never once asked me to defend him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out. He simply stayed. That steadiness changed something in me. A few months later, Renee tried again, this time digging into Jonah's criminal record and bringing it up at a family brunch, pretending it was concern. That was the moment I stopped protecting everyone else's comfort. I told the truth. About Renee. About the years of patterns. About how my family had enabled it. The room went quiet. No one apologized. But something shifted. They stopped dismissing me. And Renee, finally, had nowhere to hide. Months passed. One evening, Renee asked to meet me alone. No audience. No family buffer. Just us. She apologized. Not the kind of apology that comes with excuses. Not the kind meant to regain control. She admitted she needed attention. That she felt powerful taking what others loved. That she had built her identity around winning. I didn't forgive her right away. I set boundaries. Real ones. Jonah and I moved in together. We adopted a dog. We built a quiet, ordinary life. One that didn't revolve around family approval. A year later, Renee reached out again. This time, different. She was in therapy. She was engaged to a woman she'd met while actually doing the work on herself. She invited me to the wedding. I said yes. I don't know what the future holds for my family. I don't know if everything is healed. But for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of being overshadowed. Because someone finally chose me. And this time, no one could take that away.